Let's talk carbohydrates. So, carbs, if you are an athlete of any kind, if you've ever done like a pasta party before a big game, pasta is predominantly carbohydrates. Carbohydrates have a great function in the body. They help to provide energy in the form of glucose to your cells. Therefore, you're a primed, ready cell respiration masterpiece. But before we go into that, we're going to figure out what is a carbohydrate and how does it function. So, carbohydrates are compounds consisting of carbon and water, hence the name carbohydrate. Carbon, water. So, since water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, the atoms that comprise carbohydrates are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, or CHO, I like to call it for short. So, simple carbohydrates are called sugars, monosaccharides, or disaccharides. So, mono equals 1, di equals 2. Okay? Monosaccharides, disaccharides, those are simple sugars. So our formula for monosaccharides, so monosaccharides have equal amounts of carbon and water. So one way to write the general formula is CxH2OX. Now, the way that I like to say this is that they have twice as many hydrogen atoms as they do oxygen and carbon. So your carbon and oxygen will equal each other, just like here, C6O6, but your hydrogen is 2x. So it would be 6 times 2 is 12. You could see it here, 7 and 7, 14, 3 and 3, 6. So these are carbohydrate formulas. So it's CxH2XOX, just like this. This is our general formula for monosaccharides. Now, whenever you see these blue linky things, you can click on them, watch videos. They're helpful. It is helpful to hear somebody else explaining this aside from just me, okay? So monosaccharides are our simplest carbohydrate. They are the monomers that are used to build more complex carbohydrates, okay? The most common monosaccharides we're going to be talking about in this unit, or for this year for this matter, are glucose and fructose. Glucose, super simple sugar. Fructose, fruit found in a lot of fruits, okay? Disaccharides are formed by combining these two monosaccharides. It's still technically a simple sugar, right? But we're looking at the combination of two monomers, two monosaccharides to form a disaccharide. So our most popular is table sugar. We call that sucrose. Sucrose is made up of glucose and fructose bonded together. Polysaccharides, these are more complex carbohydrates. They're formed by combining chains of many monosaccharides. So, polysaccharides, the two that we're going to talk most about are starch and cellulose. Okay, and we'll get to those in a couple later slides. So, being that monosaccharides are our simplest sugars, their names typically end in ose: glucose, fructose. Okay. The roles of our simple sugars are basic. They're fuel to do work. So your cells need glucose. They do. Okay. They are the raw material for these carbon backbones. So we can form a whole bunch of them together, get these nice carbohydrate chains, right? And then the monomer for which these larger carbohydrates are synthesized. So these larger polymers, these larger carbohydrate polymers. So fruits and veg are some of your more natural sources of fructose and glucose. Okay. They are filling, a lot of fiber, okay, but they are carbohydrates. Now, if you take sugar, a teaspoon of sugar, and pour it into a glass of water and stir, that sugar is going to dissolve because sugars have these polar hydroxyl groups, so these OH minus groups in their structure, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? So it's got 5 of these hydroxyl groups, and that makes them soluble in water, okay? And because these are looking polar, right, with all of these OH minus groups attached, it'll help them to dissolve in water, all right? Now, these drawings are showing the single and double bonds of two monosaccharides, but they don't show their three-dimensional forms. I don't know if we're going to get to that, but we might. So there are other ways to represent molecules, of course. They don't have to be written out like this. So glucose, we could also write glucose as C6H12O6. All right. Fructose, again, similar. But again, look at fructose. It has all of these OHs, which helps dissolve it in water. Now, when these combine together to form big polysaccharides like starch and cellulose, those are not soluble in water, and we'll explain why when we get there. All right, so when we're drawing organic molecules, sometimes they're difficult to visualize in paper because they are three-dimensional, they are super complex. So we have the straight line, which is these guys. You have skeletal, which could be looking like this, okay? And the Haworth projections, okay? We'll show you those in a hot minute. So this is a straight line. You guys will notice I'm kind of like floating through these a little bit on the quickly side because it's not going to, this is not something that I'm super quizzing you on, but it does help to know that these things don't just occur flat in your body. They are three-dimensional, but there's only so many ways that we can display them on paper. So now this is a glucose molecule. This is also a glucose molecule, okay? Now, the wavy lines are atoms that are present that are omitted from the diagram. Okay, so there's stuff in here. The dashed lines are bonds going into the page, right? So this is supposed to represent some kind of 3D molecule, right? Wedge shows the bond coming out of the page. So you would imagine this thing is coming towards you. These two, this one's coming towards you. This one and this one are going away from the page. Again, skeletal diagram of glucose, also known as line and angle. There's different ways to skin a cat here, and this is obviously one of them. Now, this is a Hawthorne projection. So what the, not Hawthorne, Haworth projection of glucose, you're going to see the numbers represent the carbon atom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? The hydrogen atoms are not indicated, but it's understood that they're attached to the carbon atoms, all right, when 4 bonds are not shown, okay? Thicker lines provide a perspective by showing that the atoms are closer to the viewer. So the thing that I want you to take away from these 3 slides is that it is very difficult to project a 3D model and understand all of the atoms that are attached to it when it's not sitting in your hands, okay? So you could theoretically kind of skip through this, but it's helpful to know what these things look like just in case you're asked a question on the quiz and it does show you I will most likely be either using straight line or the skeletal, not the Haworth. All right, I'm going to pause here, okay? And then we're going to pick up on slide 52.